Hey guys, okay, so when it comes to renovating and extending an existing dwelling on a small lot, and when I say small lot, I mean a front lot less than 450 square meters or a rear lot less than 600 square meters, excluding the access handle, you have three key options. Option number one is to utilize the exemptions. Now, if you want to be technically correct, you do need to refer to them as prescribed accepted development requirements. Such a mouthful, no one ever bothers calling them that. We just refer to them as exemptions, essentially. So you can utilize the exemptions to bypass town planning. Winning. Option number two is to essentially comply with the acceptable outcomes contained within the dwelling house small lot code, and again, bypass town planning. If you're used to old terminology, it's what we used to refer to as self-assessable development. Now, option number three, unfortunately, is to seek a performance outcome. So essentially seek approval from council via an application to break one or more of the acceptable outcomes contained within the dwelling house small lot code. In today's video, we're going to talk all about option number one, the most exciting option. So if that sounds like it's something that interests you, if you want to know a bit more about what exemptions you can actually draw on when you have a small lot property, then stick around. Okay, so we need to address the elephant in the room right from the very start. How good are my drawing skills? Like, come on, seriously. Super artistic work. Those people that sit there and say planners can't read plans and planners can't draw clearly have not seen my drawing skills. Thankfully for me, the magic board is still MIA. B's husband has come up with some ways for me to hopefully fix it, but I just haven't had a chance to sit down and give it a go yet. So for today's video, we're actually going to work off the desktop, which, like I said, actually works to my advantage because my drawing skills are just ever so slightly better working from Word. Okay, so let's just jump in and start by explaining what exemptions actually are. In super simple terms, they're things, so they're components of a design, they're structures, they're whatever words you want to use, that can be built with absolutely no regard to the small lot rules. So no regard to the setback requirements, building length requirements, site cover requirements, etc., etc. I do need to stress we are talking about town planning requirements here. Building certification requirements totally different, but town planning wise, you can completely ignore the rest of the rule books when you're doing these things that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what I consider to be the top 10 exemptions, the most common exemptions that we come across. Let's just drive straight in. Okay, so exemption number one covers to raising to a maximum height of 9.5 meters above ground level. Now, if you don't know what that actually means, go back and watch the video that we recorded towards the end of last year. It talks all about how to work out what ground level is, 9.5, all of that sort of fun stuff. But essentially, in super simple terms, you can raise the house up to 9.5 meters provided you comply with the certifier's setback requirements. Now, I've pasted this little table here, which is taken from the QDC requirements. I think it's MP4 I have no idea. I found it somewhere. But what you can see here is for a standard 10 meter wide block, you need a minimum of 1 meter clearance to the side boundary to comply. So this example that we've got up here, it's a stock standard 10 meter wide block. The house I've drawn is intended to be 8 meters in width. That means we have 1 meter on either side. It would comply, and you can actually raise the house up to 9.5 without triggering town planning approval. Okay, let's go to exemption number two. This exemption covers enclosing under the upper level. Now, I need to be clear in saying, unlike when it comes to the character requirements, you do not need to be limited to the core of the upper level. So you can enclose under the full upper level and you are sweet. Now, one thing we need to clarify here. When it comes to raising, you do need, like I said, to comply with the side boundary setback requirements. However, when it comes to enclosing under a dwelling, you don't need to, again, from a town planning perspective. The one thing you need to keep in mind is when you get to the certifier, they will have fire rating requirements. And if your structure is within 900 of the boundary, you will need to fire rate that wall. So let's say, for example, this house up here wasn't 1 meter off this bottom boundary, the southern boundary. Let's say it was 700 off the boundary. If you enclosed under that upper level, you would need to make sure that there were no openings in that wall. So that means no windows. And you need to make sure it was built out of fire retardant materials, which typically means things like blockwork, that sort of stuff. Think about it. It's going to be like a bit of a bunker down there. It's going to be a bit of a subterranean bunker. It's probably the best way to describe it, with no windows and those solid sort of materials. Not exactly the best outcome. So what we find in that situation is people often slide the house over to get that 900 clearance, or they step that lower level in to get the 900 clearance. So from a town planning perspective, no reason you can't just go line it up with the wall above, go straight down, irrespective of what the setbacks are. But you do need to keep in mind the fire rating requirements when you get to certifier, because that could actually have a big impact on the design. Now, let's go exemption number three. This is actually probably one of the most common ones we use. This square here is designed to represent a 16 square metre, maximum 16 square metre roofed area, patio, gazebo, basically shade sort of structure. Now you need to make sure that this structure does not exceed 3 metres in height. That structure can literally go anywhere on the property. You could have it right in the front corner of the property, right at the rear corner of the property. More often than not, people end up having it tacked onto the back of the house there. It can be any shape, doesn't have to be a perfect square. I've just done a 4x4 here, but it can, as long as it doesn't exceed 16 square metres in roofed area and 3 metres in height. Okay, let's go to the next one. I tried to come up with a more creative shape. I was going to go a jelly bean or something really old school, but in the end I settled for a boring old oval. This oval is to represent a swimming pool. Now there is no size limitation on that swimming pool because council expects that the cost of actually building that pool will naturally restrict the size. Now this leads to the next exemption, which is an associated shade structure up to 10 square metres in area. Again, we're focusing on roofed area, and a maximum of 3 metres in height. So again, like that 16 square metre patio, gazebo, whatever you want to call it, you need to make sure that you don't exceed 3 metres in height. And next, a 10 square metre shed. Okay, so like previously, I've just drawn as a perfect little square, but it can be literally any shape as long as the roof area does not exceed 10 square metres, and again, assuming it does not exceed 3 metres in height. You could stick that anywhere. You could stick it in the middle of your front yard if you wanted. But again, I do stress we are only talking about town planning requirements here, not building certification requirements. They will have setback rules that you do need to adhere to. But yeah, town planning wise, you can do whatever you like in terms of location. Most people, logically, stick it in the back corner. Now, let's go to the next one. Next, we have a maximum 3 square metre roofed gatehouse. So most people like to stick that right in the middle of the front boundary. But again, I'm sounding like a broken record here. You can stick it anywhere you like within the property. Now, this next one is probably our most common exemption that we draw on. It is a 3x6 carport, essentially a single width carport. Now, the thing you need to know here is that it's measured from post to post. So outer edge of post to outer edge of post. It does not include eaves. So you can have 3 metres in width with, let's say, 45 centimetre eaves on either side to get that little bit extra out of the side. Now, this next one's not one that people tend to use a lot. I'm not quite sure why. You can do a roof over an existing deck or balcony without triggering town planning approval. Nice. You do just need to ensure that it does not exceed 9.5 metres in height. So again, we go back to that whole raising to 9.5, similar sort of methodology there. Okay, let's go to lucky number 10, the lucky last exemption that we're going to talk about today. I thought this is a rather creative way of showing this one. Internal building works. So you can essentially do whatever you like on the inside. Now, the one thing, if you were following our social media recently, you would have seen that we actually said the internal building work definition excludes you from doing work that would essentially create a non-compliant outcome with the self-assessable requirements. So there is a few little limitations there, but generally speaking, you can go for your life. You can bulldoze the inside, rearrange walls, go crazy, have fun, do whatever you want, and it does not trigger any town planning approvals. So there you go. As you can see, you can actually do quite a fair bit of work. Like if you want to use all those exemptions at once, that's a fair amount of stuff on the stuff, technical term, on the property that you could actually do without, like I said, considering any town planning rules and requirements. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You do need to consider the certifier's rules and requirements. There may be relaxations required, all that sort of stuff. That's totally separate to town planning. We're not talking about that today. So I think that covers everything that I wanted to talk about. So there you go. Hopefully today's video has given you a bit more understanding of the various exemptions that you can draw on when it comes to a small lot. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that there is technically 3 different options. Option number 2 being to comply with the acceptable outcomes, essentially do what's called self-assessment. We're going to focus on that in a future video. Not quite sure yet whether it'll be next week's video or maybe one a little bit down the track. But if that sounds like it's something that interests you, keep an eye out for it. Until next time, thanks for watching, guys.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got 3. Number 1, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number 2, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number 3. What was my number 3? Oh yeah. The views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.